3 hours after Adolf Hitler gave his yes to Eva Braun in the bunker in Berlin, he would put his signature on another important document: his political testament. Soviet forces had encircled the Reich Chancellery, which lay on top of the bunker where Hitler, Eva Braun, Martin Bormann, Joseph Goebbels, and the rest of what remained of the Nazi government was staying. Traudl Junge, Hitler's private secretary, would put the testament on paper with her typewriter. Hitler arrived in his office, straight from the champagne toast at his wedding, with prepared notes, which he probably prepared together with Joseph Goebbels and Martin Bormann. In his political testament, Hitler outlines that he has worked tirelessly for Germany for more than 3 decades, ever since he enlisted in the Bavarian army to fight in World War I in 1914. He also claimed that Germany had no blame in either of the world wars and that the Second World War was started by Jewish statesmen and political leaders who worked for Jewish interests. He also claimed that he had championed disarmament and predicted the outbreak of a Third World War, where England and the United States would be Germany's enemy, where Germans would once again rise against the people he claimed was responsible, international Jewry and its accomplices. Hitler also made a claim that he only 3 days before the outbreak of the Second World War had made a peace offering including international involvement in Poland, that the British had rejected. He then went on to say that the Jews had gotten what they deserved for starting the war, as they, according to Hitler, had inflicted tremendous damages to Europe's Aryan population. Hitler then rounded of this part of the will by stating that he would not leave Berlin and had decided to stay in the Reich capital and commit suicide rather than being captured by the enemy. In the second part of Hitler's testament, he took care of the more practical things regarding his own death and departing as Führer. He started by declaring that he expelled Hermann Göring from the party. The reason for this being that Göring, then located in Bavaria, 6 days earlier had declared that he was now the Führer of Germany, when he couldn't get hold of Hitler as he was isolated in the bunker in Berlin. Göring believed Hitler was trapped and not able to fulfill the office, and as Hitler's designated successor he had to step in. When the word reached Hitler and his private secretary Martin Bormann, Bormann convinced Hitler that Göring had committed treason, and they forced Göring to resign from all his offices and be put under house arrest in his house in the Obersalzberg. The fact that Göring had established contact with the Western Allies in order to make a peace settlement without involving the Führer further infuriated Hitler. Göring had been Hitler's designated successor since Hitler's speech to the Reichstag on the 1st of September 1939 as the invasion of Poland was just starting. He was now replaced by Admiral Karl Donitz. Hitler's testimony therefore took away the only remaining tie Göring had to the Nazi government, his party membership. Heinrich Himmler led the same fate. Hitler was furious that Himmler had started peace negotiations with the Americans without Hitler's consent, and also expelled him from the party and had Karl Henke replace him as SS chief and Paul Geisler as Minister of the Interior. Hitler then went on to declare that his office of Führer was to be split in 2, and return to the pre-1934 arrangement with a president and a chancellor. As mentioned earlier, Hitler appointed Admiral Donitz to the presidency and he then went on to appoint his propaganda minister, the fanatic anti-Semite Joseph Goebbels, to the office of chancellor. The testament then goes on to list all the appointees for the Goebbels cabinet. This part of the testament was not yet finished when Hitler started to give his dictate to Secretary Junge. He therefore left the room to sit with Bormann and Goebbels and they would together come up with the names. When Secretary Junge had typed 3 copies of the testament in the early morning on the 29th of April, 3 different couriers was sent out of the bunker and out of Berlin. The first was Willy Johann Meyer, a 29-year-old army major. He was sent to find Field Marshal Ferdinand Schörner with a copy of the testament and to inform him that he was now commander-in-chief of the army. An office Hitler had held since 1941. Schörner was at this point in command of Army Group Center and located in Bohemia in present-day Czech Republic. Johann Meyer got a lieutenant colonel in the Luftwaffe to fly him from Wannsee in the outskirts of Berlin towards Bohemia, but due to the Soviets' command of the air they had no choice but to turn back. Johann Meyer would then proceed to bury the documents in his family's garden before he was arrested by the Americans. The second was 34-year-old SS Colonel Wilhelm Zander, who was sent north to inform Grand Admiral Dönitz that he was now President of Germany. Zander made it out of Berlin and passed the Soviet lines and managed to notify Dönitz. He kept the documents and they eventually fell into British and American hands when Zander was arrested in 1946. The third and last messenger was Heinz Lorenz, a 31-year-old official in the Nazi propaganda machine. He was to try to reach Munich and hand over a copy of the testament to the Nazi party offices there so it could be archived. Lorenz decided to travel west, not south, and was eventually arrested by the British in June. The Dönitz government only lasted a few weeks, until they were arrested on May 23, leaving Germany without any head of state or political leadership.